Hey guys, so today I want to talk about breastfeeding. Breastfeeding for me has been quite the challenge over the past 2.5 months. My baby is finally starting to breastfeed more exclusively. We have been breastfeeding and pumping. We have not been doing formula or anything like that, but he is finally starting to breastfeed a majority of the time. Basically, what happened is from the very beginning, he just couldn't figure out how to latch. He has a minor posterior tongue tie and he has a lip tie, but we did not choose to get either one revised, mainly because the risks just didn't outweigh the potential success that he would have because they were so minor. We just didn't feel like it was the best decision for him. Starting in the hospital, we were not able to get him to breastfeed, so we had to hand express into a spoon and give it to him that way, which was very unglamorous and a very just kind of a rough way to start the whole breastfeeding journey. After that, my milk came in basically the second day at the hospital, and so I automatically had an oversupply. So if you know anything about having an oversupply with breastfeeding, it is not a lot of fun, because you have so much milk, and especially when they're so little, they just don't drink that much. And because he wasn't latching, I was producing, but then he wasn't taking it, and so it was just causing issues within my breast tissue. The day we got home from the hospital was Christmas Eve. The next day, on Christmas Day, I started getting a lot of symptoms of mastitis. I was having large lumps in my breast. I was not choosing to pump because I knew that you really shouldn't be pumping until about the 6-week mark, but because he was not breastfeeding successfully, my simple hand expression was just not clearing my breast out enough. So luckily, thank you to a wonderful family friend who happened to be over for Christmas Day, took one look at me. She is a doctor in a pediatric center in a hospital up north, and she took one look at me and was like, "You need to pump, like now." She was like, "I know that you don't necessarily want to, but you're gonna get mastitis if you don't get that milk out." So Jay, Christmas night, drove back to our house. We were staying at my parents' house. So he drove to our house, got our pump, which we rented from the hospital, and we brought it back to the house and started pumping. And within that first night, I'm pretty sure I got 4 ounces, and that was just 3 days after baby had arrived. So from then on, I started to pump. I knew that pumping was going to increase my supply and potentially cause more issues, but because I already had an oversupply, I needed to get that milk out, and since he wasn't latching, I couldn't have him do it for me. So over the next few weeks, we went to go see the lactation specialist. We went every single week for about 7 weeks. He's, I think, about 9-10 weeks old right now. And so we went about 7 or 8 times throughout the first few weeks of his life. And we haven't gotten that bill yet. I'm kind of terrified of that, but they were so helpful. They were so just generous with their time and just took their time to try to get him to latch and just encourage me on the journey. First few times that we went to the lactation specialist, they rated the baby from 1 to 10 as far as like how successfully they breastfed. 10 would be like the best baby out there that breastfed, and 0 would be one that just is basically failing to thrive with breastfeeding. And he scored about between a 1 and a 2, depending on the specialists that we saw for the first couple weeks. And so that was really discouraging. I really had my hopes up for him to breastfeed from the beginning. I plan on breastfeeding for up to a year, if not longer. And so it was basically like all of my dreams that I had for breastfeeding him were like flying out the window. It was the most emotional experience above anything else. Like, I could take healing from labor and everything like that, but the fact that he was not able to breastfeed was so miserable, and pumping was so miserable. And so my first few, like basically 5-6 weeks of having him, he was eating about every 3 hours, and so I would pump, feed him, sleep, eat myself, and then pump, feed, eat. Speaking of, I can hear him. And so we just kept that cycle for like 3-hour segments. My husband was so gracious to help. So while I was pumping, he would feed the baby because we did have an oversupply. And so we were able to get ahead of ourselves, and so that I didn't have to pump right before I fed him. We had enough to just kind of sustain that cycle. Oversupply has continued. I am, like I said, about 9-10 weeks postpartum. I produced anywhere from 4 to 8 ounces at a time. I have gotten pretty close to 10 ounces, a couple of different pumping sessions. We are starting to breastfeed him during the day pretty exclusively, so he'll not eat as much because his latch just isn't very successful, and so he just doesn't tend to get as much during a single breastfeeding session, and so he'll eat definitely at like every 2.5-3 hours. And at night we are pumping and feeding him a bottle, mainly just for our own sanity's sake and to let my nipples simply heal. So at night we are feeding him a bottle. We feed him a bottle around 10 o'clock, and he typically can last till about 3 o'clock, maybe 3:30 if we're lucky, and we will feed him another bottle at that time. So my husband and I will get up in the middle of the night around 3:30, and I will pump and he will give the baby the bottle. That is simply just kind of the routine that works for us, because I am having to still pump, and because his latch is really painful for me, we like to give my nipples a break at night, and I just don't want to fuss with trying to get him latched on at night, and especially because he tends to fall asleep at the breast really quickly. I know he's not getting as much food, and so for our own sanity, to get a little bit longer sessions of sleep, we are giving him a bottle of pumped breast milk. Overall, breastfeeding is going pretty well. We are just kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of up and down. I really grieved at the beginning of not being able to breastfeed. I didn't really expect that. I didn't expect to not be able to breastfeed. And so I just grieved the process. I cried often and a lot, and it was, I'm very thankful that at this point he is getting better, and each week he really was progressing little by little. It was basically, we would take 2 steps forward and then 1 step back and then continue that cycle even up until now. Like I said, the issue with his latch is that he does have a posterior tongue tie, he does have a lip tie, which is causing him to have a shallow latch. He did not stick out his tongue until about 6 weeks old, and so he would not stick his tongue past his gum line before that time, which meant that when we would try to breastfeed him, he wasn't getting his tongue underneath the nipple, and instead it was getting, his gums were like squishing the breast and the nipple and causing my nipple to just kind of deform and causing them to crack and bleed. And so that was not fun at all, but we kept trekking on, and he has gotten better. He's now able to stick his tongue out past his lips, which is very helpful for me. He has always been very interested in breastfeeding. He roots around really great, but he doesn't do the typical like licking and just suckling that a typical baby would do. And so we've really had to do a lot of suck training, whether that's sticking a glove on your finger and sticking it in his mouth trying to get him to suck. He doesn't like pacifiers. We've been working with a pacifier, but he just doesn't really like them, mainly because he's not good at latching, and so having to get a pacifier in his mouth and keep it in his mouth is really tough for him. So we're continuing to work with that. We did try nipple shields. They did not work for us. He just was never able to latch successfully with a nipple shield. We tried multiple different sizes of nipple shields as well, and none of them really, he just couldn't get a good latch. He kept slipping off, and while it helped reduce the pain that I was feeling, it just wasn't successful for us. Overall, breastfeeding has been one of the roughest experiences that I have had thus far. I have cried more often than I would like to admit. It's really tough when he just isn't able to latch, and it's really tough when it's painful. Even this morning as I was trying to breastfeed him, he would get on the breast and I'm like literally kicking my legs because it hurts so bad, and I'm having to like readjust his jaw and his upper lip, trying to get his lip to flare out to get him to have a deeper latch onto the nipple to reduce the pain. Typically, if after like a minute or so, he kind of gets the hang of it and it stops hurting, which is wonderful. But the first like minute or even a couple minutes is always really rough. So that in short is my breastfeeding update. I have actually recorded this video twice and I rambled on for like a good 20 minutes and it just didn't make sense. And so I am recording it for a third time. And basically that's our update. He is still not breastfeeding very well. I'm still having pains in my nipples. They're not cracked and they're not bleeding anymore. And so we have actually stopped going to lactation specialists because his latch is good enough and there's not a whole lot that they can do at this point. He just kind of needs to continue to learn how to breastfeed. And after about 8 sessions at the lactation specialist, we've kind of covered everything that we needed to. And so we are really just working on everything that they have suggested for us to do. I might go see them one last time. I have been still renting a hospital pump from them. I know that my insurance actually gave me a Medela in Style pump to use for free, which was awesome. Just the way that our insurance worked, it was free for us. But because I had such an oversupply and I was getting so many hard lumps in my breast, it wasn't able to pump them out as well. And so that's why we got the hospital grade pump that we have rented since he was born. And so that's been a really great thing. I have not used it in about a week because I wanted to make sure that my pump was able to clear the breast out if my little baby was not able to occasionally do it for us. Overall, my supply is regulating a lot more. I still, like I said, produce anywhere from 4 to 8 ounces at a pump session. And so, but I am not getting hard lumps hardly ever, and my breasts are finally starting to feel empty after I feed him and empty after I pump, because for the first about 6-7 weeks, even if I pumped for 20-30 minutes, I would still feel pretty full. And even if I breastfed him for the same amount of time, I would still kind of feel full. And so it's really nice that my breasts are finally regulating themselves out, and we are just continuing to breastfeed. I'm going to continue to breastfeed as long as the relationship between he and I is going well, and because I don't want to start like resenting him for hurting me and start getting more frustrated with the breastfeeding experience. But we're doing really well, and that's about it. That's what I got for our breastfeeding update. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope it wasn't too scattered. I know it was a little bit scattered, but that is all that I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed this breastfeeding update, and please press the subscribe button below and give it a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.